first thing is really to set the stage. I think many of you have heard this term, the new normal. We've seen a really exceptional number of changes occur to what's going on in the global economy over the last year. First of all, I think it's important to mention that we're seeing intense demand for job creation and growth. Every single government I meet with, they're like, that's what we're really all about doing. And I think for us as entrepreneurs, this means there's a great demand for new value creation. We're not budget people. We don't sit there and carve up an existing cake. What we do as entrepreneurs is we build the cake and we make it bigger. The second thing we're seeing, and I think the evidence of this is what we see in the disruption to our political systems, is we're seeing digital transparency and the rise of an information-rich grassroots communities. What this really means is we've sort of democratized information even further. So everybody knows everything and can see everything. And this means that you've got these anomalies occurring in things that we would expect to have elections or things occur in one way. And of course, we naturally look at an unexpected result in the United States, and we look at an unexpected result in Europe, but those are just, I think, symbols of the fact that we're seeing a lot greater degree of uncertainty of what outcomes of what's happening, both in our political systems and in our economic systems. And I think the economic one is perhaps the more interesting one to us, because we're entering an era where the speed of change is, of course, increasing, but we're entering an era where we're seeing this most extraordinary degree of disruption. And just to put it succinctly, what we're seeing that many of you have been involved with GW since 2008, and many of you have been involved in other local community programs to be able to build support for entrepreneurship. And one of the things you've created is an army of entrepreneurs. You've certainly created a culture where what you do is a path that people would like to do. So we've got a lot more people trying. Now, some people turn around to me, some of the old guys, and they're like, I don't know. I mean, you got all this startup activity, you got all these people doing things, but how many of them are really starting companies and scaling companies? I mean, is this just like an activity they're doing in this? Is it just because it's popular right now to be doing entrepreneurship? Well, the important thing for me is you've now got armies that are now applying themselves to the really hard problems. It's not just developing an app to figure out how am I going to get my product or service delivered in 3 hours rather than 3 days. This is now, how am I going to disrupt what is a traditional industry and often a semi-regulated industry of transportation, energy, healthcare, and so forth. And so as a result, we're seeing this era where the Ubers and the Airbnbs have heralded an era where we're disrupting our traditional industries, and that as a result is going to bring government in a much greater degree. You'll notice that we're bringing more government into the GEC. That's not because we felt, oh gosh, we got to bow to the government, protocol, respect. We're bringing government in because we felt that government is going to need to be a bigger actor at the table. They're going to be the victims of an extraordinary degree of regulatory chaos. It's not just cities figuring out, what do I do when Uber comes along and does something to my taxi cab regulations? It's going to be in every single industry. And so now we have to fight to be able to work out how we're going to enable government to be a partner and much more effective in that regard. So, the most exciting thing about this, and the reason that I, frankly, get in front of entrepreneurs, and it doesn't matter if I had no sleep and I'm always invigorated, is because I, as you well know, for many of you that have heard me before, believe that entrepreneurs are possibly the most optimistic thing on the planet. It's not just that they always see answers. It's not just that they always see the glass half full. It's the fact that they are curious about figuring out better ways of doing things, but they are best in this era of uncertainty and disruption and speedy change. They are the best citizens on the planet to help us tackle it. They are not perturbed by that. When someone changes all the rules, they see opportunity. You all know that. And so as a result, entrepreneurs have become a lot better organized, thanks to many of you and thanks to the organizations that are behind you. We know, and I won't cover these in great detail, But we know that we're much more scientific now about the process of new firm formation. We've talked about everything over the years. We've been together to do with new methodologies around lean startup. But basically, the idea here is that we're testing and validating ideas much more effectively early on so that we can be a lot more useful when it comes to instructing, delivering companies that are better investment opportunities. The second thing is we know very, very well that we're better at teams than we've never, ever been. The notion of co-founder dating is getting a lot more effective. People are bringing in the right talent. There's a sense that if I've got the wrong seat on the bus or the wrong person sitting in that seat, it's not personal when I need to change it. We know that we're understanding the value of networks is everything. It drives your access to capital. It drives your access to whether I should pivot and I'm in the right industry or the wrong industry. And we know very well that it's become the primary currency for everything from talent to finding mentors, to finding capital and markets. And the last thing, which I think we're most proud of with GEW, because we like to feel that we played a tiny, tiny role in this, is that so many of you have come up to me and said, over the years, you know, we still had this stigma of failure. We've adapted to this. We've done much better in our economies that used to still look at failure as being a curse and a disease. And this has now become something which is a lot more. It's like I always tell people, starting a business is like conducting an experiment. It's not about figuring out how I'm going to make money. It's conducting an experiment to see whether or not this would actually be viable. So we're learning differently. We're learning from our peers, which is why we created our global, our Gen Starters Club, for example. We've got, I think, as a result in this community, a much more level playing field. We're getting better at understanding the importance of our ecosystems. We'll be talking a lot about that as Gen over the years. The notion that there's a spirit in this process. This isn't just about the mechanics of getting the actors in your ecosystem together. It's what I might describe as a renewed human spirit for figuring out how do you create value for society? I mean, entrepreneurs do this as businesses, but when they get into these ecosystems and then they bring in the government, bring in the companies, bring in the other actors, all of a sudden there's a sense of, you know what, there's something here that we could do which creates even more value than just the value of an enterprise. And I think the thing that I'm lastly most excited about, and I think it's possibly most evident here, for us it was a very inspiring moment in 2012, when we all gathered in Moscow and we had 7,000 people for the GEC and not a single person, maybe 13 we found out, canceled despite the fact that Putin had just invaded the Crimea. And so as a result, we felt this was a powerful group. They weren't put off by the daily geopolitical comments of the day. They were a group that felt that it didn't matter what was happening on the political systems, that we as a collective group of entrepreneurial ecosystems, entrepreneurs and investors and support communities were able to be something that was indeed bigger than the sum of the parts. And so I'd like to feel that the fact that we do recognize that we all will be stronger if each and every one of us succeeds. It's perhaps the most rewarding thing of being in our community, and that is that everybody will celebrate. They will not reject the fact that you've been a success as a competitor. There will not be jealousy in this community. So I'd like to, if we could, just tell you a couple of things about just Gen Global, and then I want to get into a conversation where we hear from you. But if I summarize this, you've seen this before. We very much emphasized that this is about we still need more entrepreneurs. I think the attack on globalization and the rise of nationalism means that we're going to see a great need for us to continue to do that. We've got to find better ways of integrating our disruptive communities with those of the status quo. I used to talk about this as bringing together the tucked shirts and the untucked shirts, and then one of the members of my board reminded me that that was a little bit of a sexist comment because it assumed that, but you get the gist. It's bringing together the notion of the traditional companies that are about to be disrupted, the traditional governments that are about to be disruptive in their regulatory environments, the traditional universities that are about to be put out of business because entrepreneurs don't want to be trained in the classroom, they want to be trained by each other. So I think you end up with how do you bring these disruptors together with the traditional powerful elements of our society. We also think that we've got to very much focus on global founders. We would like to feel that if you're an entrepreneur, and Bright Tap's here, the winner of our Startup Open, welcome. We'd like to feel that we would put you on a global stage on day one. I think every part of what we do at Gen is always built on this assumption that we'd like anybody, anywhere to be able to start a business. It doesn't matter how rich or poor your economy is or what your political system is, that's what we intend to be able to do. And lastly, and I think this comes deeply from our tradition of being born from the cloth of the Kauffman Foundation that's tried to bring academic rigor to our field and to the discipline of really making sure that we sort out the fluff from the fact. And that is that we want to make sure that we do a lot of peer review analysis of what works. We're very proud to have many new members of our GW board. And one of our members, Susan, who comes from a rigorous background in this regard, reminds me, I said, what do you want to do as a board member? She said, I want to be part of that rigor. I want to look at the data. I want to look at the outputs. I want to look at the discipline here. So welcome, Susan. Thank you for coming. So we certainly look here, and you've seen this chart before. We try to position our world under the notion of all the things we do to connect you, all the things we do to understand your field, all the things that we do to support our entrepreneurs, and all the things that we do to celebrate entrepreneurship in the presence of both the old and the new, of governments, of all the people that are in your ecosystems and the people that are not in your ecosystems. The goal is not to make everybody in society an entrepreneur, but we want everyone in your society to recognize that entrepreneurs are a force for good. They're not just the creators of jobs and economic growth, but they are also a powerful fabric of your society. All right, so very quickly, today we're going to give you a little bit more very snapshot update on what these programs are. We're going to do that, however, after we begin a conversation with you about what these programs could do that is beyond what they do as individual programs. But before we do that, let me just remind you what we have here. And I'm not going to go through a slide on each one of these, but if you look at this chart, you'll see in the programs and resources, first of all, we have a program called Startup Huddle. It's one that I hope each and every one of you will study while you're here. Over the course of the next couple of days, there are one-on-one sessions you can have with Stephen Rodriguez on our team, in fact, Stephen Stand Up from Startup Huddle. You'll be seeing more from Stephen later. He's over here. But we have, it's essentially a way of building community from scratch, especially those of you that still have communities that have zero sort of entrepreneurial energy. But the mission is this: it's like Alcoholics Anonymous for entrepreneurs. You stand on the stage, it's helping one entrepreneur at a time. We all gather on usually in the US model, you gather on a Wednesday morning for a cup of coffee, and for about an hour, everybody goes to work on this entrepreneur, okay? The entrepreneur talks about challenges, talks about opportunities, and everybody gets to work on that entrepreneur. The model was created by the Kauffman Foundation. It's called 1 Million Cups in the UK, and we're going to be doing a similar model to that around the world, and we've got some people that have been piloting that already. We have a variety of other programs. Most importantly, on the investor side, we have the Global Business Angels Network, which is bringing together a lot of the heavyweight leaders that you'll meet today in the angel investor network world. And obviously that's designed to ensure that we get healthier angel investor communities in all countries of the world, but also that we allow for a lot more effective methodologies around how we do cross-border investing. And you'll see there's an entire early stage investor track throughout the entire part of this week. There are multiple parallel sessions. There's multiple meetings. We have our annual meeting, the Global Business Angels Network. You'll learn more about that later. We have programs where we're finding ways to bring people from the informal economy into the formal economy. So we've got something called Global Enterprise Registration, which is how we're putting online for entrepreneurs all of the regulatory things in conjunction with the UN and with the State Department. Governments are signing up, putting all of their material online, which explains what are all the regulatory things you have to be able to do. And then, of course, we have a whole range of competitions. We have a new competitions platform on our site. You'll learn more about those competitions today as we move forward. We have our Gen Starters Club that I mentioned, which is the winners of most of the competitions around the world. We have a platform called Startup Compete, which manages those competitions, most of them. And the winners of those competitions are put into a club. It's not very democratic. It's basically you get in on merit. You kind of came in because you won a competition. And as a result of that, we hope that as a peer network, you guys will figure out cool things to do like skydiving trips and other things to be able to figure out how you're going to help each other along the course of the way. On the understand portion, you'll learn lots about that. This week we have a ministerial, the highest level of that. what I might describe as where the rubber hits the road, the real level, the startup nations work that we do. You'll hear from someone today who was President Obama's right hand in startup policy for the last 8 years, talking about how they managed to get the world of government to understand the difference between an entrepreneur and a small business. And our Startup Nations community has taken that entrepreneur policy part of it and really worked to try to deepen the understanding of elected officials and others around the world in understanding that it's a different toolbox to help people advance rates of new firm formation than it is to get them to do to support small business generally. And then we have, we're very proud of our Global Entrepreneurship Research Network, which is made up of the primary funders of entrepreneurship research. They are the listeners here. They listen to what the entrepreneurs say. They listen to what they listen very carefully to what they look for the gaps that more research is needed, particularly on the policymaker side. And lastly, we've, of course, beyond Global Entrepreneurship Week itself, we've got a variety of events and activities. You'll learn about some of the ones that are coming up. But as you know, in addition to this Congress, like TED has TEDx, we have GEC+. And so I see the Turkish delegation has arrived. We're gonna call you out for being late, so good morning. And so you'll learn more about some of the other activities. The general concept of that is we work on the assumption that we know you can only get so far with online technology, that ultimately at the end of the day you need to be able to break bread together, drink wine together, talk together, listen and work together. And so that's why we try to provide these activities both in smaller regional groups but also in global groups. All right, so without further ado, I want to welcome to the stage our team members who are going to tell you about themselves, what they do, and what we're going to do. But I'm going to preface it by saying I've got some slides here that we can call on later, which we're not going to use. But I want to mention that I'm going to put one up here, though, which gives you some sense of, wait a minute, where did I lose that? Okay. All right, we'll just leave, this is important. So I'll just put this up here and then I'll turn over to your slides. So the question here today is, I know in the room we've got many of our Global Business Angel Investor Network members. There are 57 countries. I know in this room we have some ministers. I know in this room we have some staff of governments. As you know, we have, I think, 35 governments sending their minister for our ministerial, the African ministerial tonight, and then we have a ministerial tomorrow. I know in this room we have some entrepreneurs. I know in this room that we have many of the other programs. We've got some of the very best global competitions that really help entrepreneurs work their way into understanding how they're going to proceed forward. Everything from Get in the Ring to the Creative Business Cup and beyond. I know in the room we've got all of the leaders of our national programs. Some of you are our Gen managing directors. Some of you are still running our Global Entrepreneurship Week programs. But we've got all of these pockets, and we work with you individually. But, you know, it was pointed out to me one day, another great insight from New Zealand with Dave Moskowitz. You know, these guys, you know, it's good for them to specialize and to really dig deep. But you know what? You're one global entrepreneurial ecosystem. So what we're going to try to do today is there some really exciting stuff that we could do that's bigger than the sum of the parts? We'll have conversations about how we can do more in the angel investor world, how we can do more in terms of what we might do on policy or research or support programs. We'll come to that later in the day. But what I'd like to do is start today by saying, guess what? I gave you the world. You are a community that represents 171 countries. You cover pretty much every aspect of the ecosystems that you make up. I'm empowering you to say, don't listen to us, we just serve you. We're just the staff at the global level. What could we all do together that could be much bigger and greater? You know what the threats are. I've talked about them this morning. You know what the opportunities and the challenges are. But what could we do that could be bigger than the things that we could do as either individual countries or individual communities within the entrepreneurial ecosystem? So without further ado, I will welcome the team to the stage.